Welcome to Brave Together Parenting, an empowering and truly helpful podcast for the parents of children with disabilities and all unique needs.
The problem solving itself is so phenomenal because not only are you solving problems, but the way in which you go about solving the problems that are meaningful to these kids' lives and you're involving them in solving these problems, the way you're doing it explicitly teaches the skills that they don't have that are causing the problems to begin with. Right. So when we talked about before, when I was like in this situation where the demands of the situation were outstripping my skills, right? Most of our kids, when they are overwhelmed by big feelings, when they are not their best selves, when they're just not, they're melting down, having a hard time, all of those things, really what's happening is they're bumping up against expectations that they are not equipped to meet. And this method of problem solving teaches those skills that they need to be able to get over those hurdles that are coming in the future, So for example, like when it comes to the moments where there's a lot of charge, there's a lot of reactivity, maybe there's a lot of shame on the part of the kid, those ones, they work really well in this model because there is distance from all the things that are problematic. So most of the work of the parent happens before the meeting. So when you sit down to do a plan B, it might take 10 minutes because the parent has done a lot of work ahead of time in a number of different ways. So the parent has to fully understand the expectation that the child is bumping up against and having a hard time meeting. So lots of times when parents come to me, they're like, gosh, it's just impossible to get out of the house in the morning. Like that's the problem, getting ready in the morning. And so they want to try to problem solve getting ready in the morning, right?
Yes.
Susanna, what does getting ready in the morning entail? Think about it. Like how many steps is getting
right?
So, I mean, there's the waking up.
Yes.
The literal waking up. Yes. Then there's going to the bathroom. Then there's choosing what to wear. Then there's putting the clothes on, choosing what to eat, making it, eating it, brushing teeth. There's a lot that happens. And so when we try to just problem solve getting out of the house in the morning or getting ready in the morning, like that's a lot to try to do in one time. So when I'm working with parents, and what this model asks you to do is to break it down and to get really, really granular in what we're doing, right? Good. So we're going to problem solve, like we're going to pinpoint the moment that the child bumps up against an expectation that they can't meet, whether that is physically getting dressed, choosing what to wear, the act of putting the toothbrush into the mouth, like what part of it do we see the change? Do we see the resistance? Do we see that I'm not doing it? I'm not going to school. Like, where is that? And so that's a lot of the work beforehand, so that when we get to the kid and we start the problem solving conversation, we don't come to them saying like, oh my gosh, you have so many meltdowns right before school. We never get out of the house on time. You're always hitting your sibling or screaming at someone. We don't give the litany of all the things that they do wrong. We come to them with just like, hey, buddy, I've been noticing it's been pretty hard for you to get your socks on in the morning. What's up? You take all that emotional charge out of it and you put all of that into the word difficulty. And difficulty encompasses all of those things, and you don't have to say them. You don't have to bring them up. The kid knows.
Right.
Like, I mean, by the time kids are 5, like, they know what they look like when they're having a hard time with something.
Right.
They remember hitting you with the shoe. They remember. We don't need to say it.
Yeah.
We don't need to say it.
Yeah.
So especially for those things that are laden, just heavy for whatever reason for our kids, this model, CPS, is phenomenal because it takes that emotional charge out of it. And then it teaches the skills. So like when you're going through that first step of figuring out like what's getting in the kid's way, we're not going to go from a place of emotion and say like, why do you hate getting your socks on? Like, why is it so hard for you? You're coming from a place of, let's figure this out. let's think about what needs to happen in order for us to get our shoes on in the morning. Well, first we have to know where our shoes are. Is there anything that gets in the way of knowing where our shoes are? Yeah, sometimes they're upstairs. Sometimes I came in the back door. Okay. So that's one problem, is that sometimes it's hard to even know where the shoes are. I was just thinking too, how do we know it's time to get our shoes on? Is there anything that's hard about that? Yes, I hate it when you tell me it's time to get my shoes on. I'm 15. I don't need you to tell me that, so, just even pulling out all of the little steps, that's executive functioning, right? But some of our kids are just don't have those skills. They need practice. They need to learn how to do it. And so even breaking a task down into its component parts, all of those, the kind of the drilling for information that we're doing teaches kids how to think about a problem, how to consider themselves, check in with themselves, really ask themselves what's hard about it. And you're using really good questions what were you thinking what are you thinking when I say it's time to get your shoes on? What are you usually doing right before I tell you it's time to put your shoes on? When you go to put your foot in the sock, what's the first thing that rolls through your mind? You're really teaching them how to think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening today. Do us a favor and leave us a review and a rating so that this podcast can get into the ears and the hearts of more and more moms. Did you know that Brave Together Parenting Podcast is an extension of our nonprofit organization, We Are Brave Together? We Are Brave Together serves an international community of caregiving moms, offering support groups that are virtual and in-person, educational resources, and low-cost weekend retreats. And we have published our first anthology of caregiving stories entitled Becoming Brave Together, Heroic, Extraordinary Caregiving Stories from Mothers Hidden in Plain Sight. It will encourage and validate every parent caregiver. To join us today, go to wearebravetogether.org. Our support and sisterhood awaits you. Brave Together Parenting Podcast is for entertainment and education purposes only. It's not a substitute for professional care and should not be relied on for medical or mental health advice. The use of any content on our podcast, links, show notes, or on our website is to be done at your own personal risk. Please seek out a professional to assess your own medical or mental health concerns, because we are all beautifully complex and the content of this podcast is for a broad audience.
The problem solving itself